I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Alejandro Rojas, a consultant at Enigma Labs, a data research and community platform dedicated to unidentified aerial phenomena. He's also a founding board member for the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies and has been a freelance journalist focused on space, science, sci-fi, and UFOs. He maintains the website OpenMinds.tv, and you can find his articles across the web at the Huffington Post, Dana Geek, Roswell Daily Record, and many other news outlets. Alejandro is considered an expert on the topic of UAP and appears regularly in interviews with media organizations worldwide, including Politico, BBC, NBC, Fox, Coast to Coast AM, the Travel Channel, Sci-Fi, National Geographic, and E! Alejandro is the former director of operations for Open Minds Production, the host of the Open Minds UFO radio show, editor and contributing writer for OpenMinds.tv, and EMC for the International UFO Congress. For several years, he was also the official spokesperson for the Mutual UFO Network as the director of public education. As a UFO and paranormal researcher and journalist, Alejandro has spent many hours in the field investigating anomalous phenomena up close and personal. Alejandro, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you with me today. So you are currently engaged in a number of projects related to UAP. So let me start out with OpenMinds.tv, which is an online media portal specializing in UFO-related news and commentary, where you are working as editor, contributor, and radio show host. What can you tell us about the Open Minds project, and how did you get involved with that?
Yeah, Open Minds started in around 2009. We were very popular. I think one of the leading, UAP news outlets for the 2010s, getting into the 2020s. We kind of dissolved a little bit in the early 2020s, but I've kept the company and the website and maintained it because I think we've got a lot of great articles there and news and information that you still can't get anywhere else. So I've maintained the site. I've also recently rebooted the podcast as Open Minds UAP News, literally just a couple of weeks ago. So that's just rolling now. Of course, the new terminology UAP, but and we'll get into this in this new world. We need to pierce the scientific community, and there's a chance to do that. And I really felt compelled that I could use Open Minds as a vehicle to help make that happen. And so that's what I'm doing with that. Otherwise, yeah, I'm really proud. There's Jason McClellan was part of Open Minds. He's still out there doing a show, I think, called WTF UFO UAP, which is great. Maureen, another member, Ellsbury, she's sometimes does shows with Jason, but Antonio Huneas was a writer. Another writer, Ryan Sprague, was a collaborator with us, and he's still doing podcasts and doing great. So, and Michael Klein and Tom, I can't remember Tom's last name right now, but our video editors who were great are off, doing their careers outside of UAP. So, yeah, I'm really proud of all the work that we did there and proud to keep that going.
Yeah. Well, and so that's Open Minds. And then the next project you're involved with has been close to my heart for a very long time. You are a founding board member with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, which I think, and I keep promoting this, I keep plugging this to everyone, I believe the SCU is the most professional and scientifically rigorous organization out there studying the UFO phenomena. From everything I've seen, and I have seen a lot, it's not just heads and tails. It is light years beyond what anyone else is doing. So how did you get involved with this project? Because you've been there since the very beginning.
Yeah, thank you very much for saying that, because I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done at SCU over the last few years, and a lot of it's been behind the scenes, and I'll get into that. But to start off, how I got involved was essentially it all started from the Aguadilla case back in 2009-ish, 2008, where a lot of us were with MUFON. As you mentioned earlier, I left MUFON when I joined Open Minds, mostly just to competition, but have always been friendly and worked with MUFON. I think that's one of the things that's unique about me. I don't burn bridges, and I try to keep lines of communication and cooperation open. And but at the time, there was kind of a shift for MUFON where they were kind of opening their arms a little bit more up to more of the paranormal,
Mhm.
which was uncomfortable for a lot of us that were working on the science end, being a journalist and facts, mattering and that research. Really, I aligned with that scientific um, effort. I think it's the most important one, really, when it comes to this topic. And of course, I've been a science writer, so writing about and explaining science is kind of been something that I have a passion for. So, getting into SCU, essentially, this case came across from Homeland Security and the Border Patrol, where they didn't know what it was. They went to the state director, Morgan Beale, in Florida. They didn't want it to be part of a MUFON case because they didn't want to share their names. And I think I get it, and I understand MUFON's policy, why they don't take anonymous, because they want to get a hold of the witnesses to
Yeah.
follow up on cases because they investigate them. So we did it independently. They asked me to get involved as kind of a guide for the media end of things while they wrote their paper. It took about 2 years of research to gather all the data on that and then write that paper, and it's a great case. And I posted that, and soon after we posted that, this change had come, and a lot of the science branch that Robert Powell ran for MUFON wanted to do something different that was not going that kind of paranormal, more fringe route. And so that's the birth of SEU. That was focused mostly on the rigorous scientific kind of research and the type of research papers that have been coming out of what we've been doing. And I'm proud of what we've done over the last few years, because behind the scenes we've been doing a lot of networking, so bringing together groups like the AIAA, Astronomical and Aeronautical Association, that's very big and important, and Galileo, working with these scientific organizations that are starting up. Our members have co-written papers with these groups. We've worked with these groups to get them full of members that are researchers and academics, just like they're looking for. Luckily, we had that community, so we were able to help out with that. So there's a lot of back and forth behind the scenes where we've been working together that people really haven't seen. And I think we've been the backbone of the kind of scientific community when it comes to UAP research. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very proud of that. I think that we've been integral on getting all of these groups to work together and get these papers out. And the papers are coming. Uh, you know, 3, 4 years ago, there was maybe a paper or two a year if we're lucky. Now there are several. There's dozens coming out last year and this year. And that's really exciting because it just shows that despite all the back and forth and all of the fighting going on in other arenas in this field, that this scientific arena is growing and burgeoning on this topic. And I think that's extremely exciting, and it's going to be very important going forward.
Well, thank you for the history on that. Actually, I didn't know some of that myself. And as an aside, the Aguadilla case, I think most people don't realize that the Aguadilla case is truly a landmark in terms of UAP. It's very rigorous, very well documented. The footage is as good, it's actually better quality than, the Nimitz case stuff. So it's a completely separate channel that reinforces pretty much everything that we've seen from the Nimitz events, right?
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's a similar situation as Nimitz. It's a FLIR video where we were able to do some analysis. The video itself probably holds a bit more data than the Nimitz. It's longer, it's closer, so you can see it better, and let's get some more data out of it. And then we also had some great eyewitness reports for what occurred, prior and after or during. That was really important. So yeah, it's a great case, and I'm proud that now that case is getting up there. Now there's kind of 4 videos out there. There's the 3 Navy videos and Aguadilla,
Yeah.
and they're often grouped together, and that's great. I'm really proud of that because those Navy videos are really important. And I would add that the Nimitz case, we haven't really seen any official analysis. We've seen a leaked document that Lou Elizondo, who was on the inside, has confirmed, he said, was written by the military for the military. I believe that to be real, although, it hasn't gotten a lot of attention because it hasn't been claimed by anybody. But uh, at SEU, we did an extensive research paper, and that paper has done the rounds since 2017, or since that paper was written, and it's kind of held up as the analysis for that case, which is really exciting. So yeah, very proud of both of those situations.
Absolutely. Well, I also want to touch on Enigma Labs. Again, you were a consultant over there. They are built as an independent, technology focused platform for unidentified anomalous phenomena sightings. And they describe themselves as the first UAP sightings alert network. So I wanted to ask, well, first of all, how you're involved with Enigma, but also what makes their platform different from something that might be a little bit better known, like Peter Davenport's National UFO Reporting Center.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I'm really excited about Enigma. I know there's a lot of curiosity and everything, and it's really funny to me because it's mostly a group of like 20 somethings who are tech people building an app. It's like, so, you know, just what happens every day, people building apps. So it's exciting though, still. I mean, because it's this topic and I'm excited about this topic. And it's exciting to have like the resources and the talent that we have, because it's very rare that, a companies exist that spend all their resources that exist just for UAP. And I'm lucky enough now to have been part of two, which is kind of mind blowing. I put the numbers together. I've been working over 10 years full time as a full time UAP person employed by companies, which is pretty weird, pretty shocking, because that's extremely rare to even do that once. So I got involved with Enigma. Essentially, they were looking for kind of a grounded perspective on the topic, and they were really looking to develop a library, content library. And so I was recommended by colleagues in the media industry as someone being knowledgeable and able to do that. And so that's how I joined as head of content and research. Research, of course, because I can help them on that end with my associations with SCU and everything. So I did. I've gotten them in contact with a lot of different researchers and research organizations out there. We've gotten feedback from, people in SCU. We've also had a sit down with Mick West to get his input, so even the skeptics. So open to listening to everyone, and everybody's been very helpful. And they hold regular sessions. So that's another thing where people kind of try to accuse them of being closed, where they have, a Discord you can join where their staff is on there and will answer any questions anybody has. They are very attuned to looking to see what kind of questions people have out there on social media and answering those questions in a very robust FAQ that they have. So they do listen and pay attention, and they are responding. And I think that's great. So, so I've just, how's it better than New Fork? New Fork has always been low on resources. I mean, it's always been
Yeah.
one or two people answering a phone call, filling out an Excel spreadsheet. Which is great. I think what he's been able to accomplish, Peter Davenport and the rest of the crew over there, is extraordinary. I'm a big fan, and we're big fans at Enigma. In fact, we have a picture of Davenport up, and he's kind of a hero to us at Enigma. And so what we're able to do, which is really exciting though, is have this app where now we're getting, I think the importance of the app, as someone who, like you said, I've been with MUFON, a reporting organization, the largest in the country. I've been doing this for a long time. And what's exciting about the app is that we're getting a lot more videos. The easier you make it for people, the better. We've done a lot of
Okay.
talking man on the street with people, and we found that a lot of people will take videos of something they think is a UFO, but they won't do anything with it except for maybe show their family and friends. And what's great about that is we've tapped into that, and now we've made it easy where they can share this on the app. And we're getting a lot of videos. So on my podcast, I review 2 videos every week. One is a mysterious one where I'm not sure what it is, so I want help from the audience. The other is common mistakes, because of course I see these a lot. That's one of my functions at the company is I can look at a video and say Chinese lanterns,
Yeah.
that's an internal reflection. That's a lens flare. That's a bug. That's a bird. And, a lot of times I'll be met with, what? Because they're like everybody else. They're like, that's not a bird. And I'll be like, well, here's how you can tell it's a bird. And they're like, oh, because they're like everybody else. They get bummed when I debunk some of these sightings. But it's also an exciting learning moment. So I can teach people every week, here's what I look at when I look at these videos. And here's how I determine whether or not this is something mundane or not. So, and that's a big part of what we're doing at Enigma, to try to educate people so that we get better sightings. And the whole point is trying to engineer better quality data to be able to figure out what's going on with UAP. So it's exciting, the types of things we're doing. Not only that, the technology. So an alert system. So we're really beta. We're starting everything up. But right now, if you've got the app, you will be alerted if there's a significant sighting in your area. Each week, you'll be given at least some information on alert about a sighting in your area. We're working on really cool tools such as you'll be alerted there's a sighting or there's someone videotaping through the app. And then you can go outside and videotape yourself. And then the app will be able to triangulate where that object is and then determine speed or direction or those type of things, should it be moving. So triangulation, not only that, we've got something called AR Lens. And you could use this right now. The app is free. Go to Enigma, download it for Apple. And we're going to have Android soon. But this AR lens currently will show you all of the satellites in the sky. And we've got it in the beta where we've got aircraft and also cosmological things. So
Oh,
stars,
okay.
satellites. So in other words, this is one tool where you'll be able to point it at the sky if you're seeing a UFO and see, oh, that's a satellite, or that's a space station, or that's this aircraft. This is flight 1692, American Airlines going to Chicago. You'll be able to tell to that detail everything that you're looking at in the sky. So again, people are educated and they're like, oh, okay, I don't need to report this. It's just an aircraft, so that we get better reports. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Oh, and I guess,
I'm trying to visual. I've seen technology like that in the past,
yeah.
where you hold the phone up and you can tilt the phone, and it will actually do an AR view in real time, and it will show you, like the one that I'd seen showed, I believe it was planets and the moon and the sun and anything along
Mm-hmm.
those lines. So
Yeah,
I
I
kind
use
of
one
get where you're
like that
going with
quite
it.
frequently, but to have them all combined into one tool is going to be
Yeah.
really cool. And it's working in the beta, and that'll be released pretty soon here. But just real quick, getting back to my function, because I forgot that. So I built this robust database. So if you go to the website, enigmalabs.io, go to the library, you're going to have tons of really great, well-written pieces, some even written by, in fact, I worked with a lot of the writers in the debrief, because I commissioned all these, but we did hundreds of great articles on really important cases, documented historically on UFOs. So we've got a really robust library up there. And that's one of the things I developed.
Oh, wonderful. Well, speaking of libraries, I want to ask your thoughts on the recent UAP Historical Report just released by AARO. So, your
Mm-hmm.
SU colleague Robert Powell wrote a detailed, I mean, this was a long criticism of the AARO report, and it was very well written. He concluded with the statement AARO should stick to its mission statement, leave science to scientists, meet its requirements as laid out by Congress, and stop its bickering with the claims of whether or not recovered ET craft exist. That is the job of Congress. So I wanted to ask you, from a scientific perspective, what should AARO be doing? What should they be staying away from? And should they be partnering with organizations like the SCU for more detailed analysis?
I think they definitely should be parting with organizations like the SCU, but I think that the SCU, I think that I personally don't think the UFO community, including that article from Robert, is giving AARO a fair shake. And I don't think that it's um, a perspective that is shared by the mainstream. And I think that's what's
Mm.
really difficult, is that a lot of my colleagues who are journalists see things completely differently. And as someone who's, always tried to write from a journalistic perspective, and trying to keep unbiased and show all sides, I don't understand. I think that the UFO community's gone off the range, to be honest. I think that it's way too far. On the one hand, we're criticizing AARO for this report being so much about aliens. And I agree with that. I don't think it was a good report when it comes to an overall historical look at the topic. But on the other hand, as I made this argument in my last podcast, they obviously kind of changed their goal a little bit with this paper. And in the press release, they're very clear that this is more of a response to David Grush's claims from Congress. And that press release is very clear about this. I mean, it's pretty much saying that. And so that was the primary goal of that paper. Is that AARO's fault? No, that's the fault of the people making the claims. And I'm sorry, these people making the claims have no evidence. And I don't have much sympathy or excitement, and I think people have been frustrated with me about this, for Grush's claims. But it's also, I've been writing about and working with Robert Bigelow and that group for many, many years. And I'm pretty close friends with some of them. And I'm very clear about my perspective and my goals, but I also think they appreciate that because I'm honest. And what I mean by that is I know very well that what those guys did was a full paranormal investigation. And I knew that from the beginning, looking at werewolves and poltergeists and cattle mutilations. And that wasn't covered in the New York Times article. And it was a bit of a cover up by the UFO side because, and Leslie Kane has even said this, and so has Chris Mellon told me this specifically, is that that kind of information would have undermined the credibility and we wouldn't have gotten to where we are. And I think that's a valid argument for an activist, and I think that that's a smart move from someone like a Chris Mellon, who's trying to manipulate and move this forward, which we all think it should be moved forward. But that group was very proud. They were not embarrassed by the paranormal stuff they did. So when I started writing, hey guys, this wasn't just UFOs, this was all paranormal, they appreciated that. And I speak to some of them specifically at the time where everybody was like, oh, you're bashing, Dr. Eric Davis, one of the UAP task force and Bigelow group, researchers. I was like, no, I'm sharing actually more of the story than everybody else is. And sure enough, I met up with him. He was at the SCU event that year, and we hung out a lot and had a great time because, we get along. And he was like, no, he was appreciative of me sharing that information, and was very aware that I was sharing information.
That's right. That's right. You have met and spent time with David Grusch. So
exactly. He's an SCU member.
Your impressions of him. Yeah. So what are your impressions of him then?
The whole group. The group is great. I think that I love boots on the ground and people rolling up their sleeves and getting to work and doing something. And that's what these guys have always done. And I think that's really cool. I think that's great. I think where the danger lies is being cooperative. And I know that sometimes we do a lot of hard work and then we want to be like, this is my work. I don't want to give it away to everybody else and then let them make claims and about that. But that's what's important, especially with science. It's got to be open and transparent, and it's got to be collaborative. It has to be. And so I think that's where there's trouble. I think that they need to make sure they're collaborative, and we need to make sure that when there are claims being made that people inside the expertise of whatever we're looking at, let's say we're looking at a metal, we need metallurgists, we need chemists, we need the right people looking at it and giving their expert opinion. And that's really important. And we're at a point where we can get expert opinion. And that's going to be always the most important, because we've seen this and it has undermined the credibility of this topic, where there are people kind of getting ahead of their skis. They're coming out and making claims that are outside of their kind of wheelhouse. And then people who are experts in those areas are saying, wait, you've actually got this a little wrong. And then, it then undermines the credibility.
Well, if I could jump in, that goes to this topic of UAP science versus UAP speculation, right? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about David Grusch a moment ago. I also wanted to throw in Dr. James Lacatski, who recently made claims, I believe those were along with Colm Kelleher, on skinwalkers in the Pentagon when the book came out. And then there's the Eric Davis Wilson Memo that he has neither confirmed nor denied, but most people seem to believe could be real, right? And one of the things that concerns me, and I absolutely wanted to ask about this, was this goes back to the AARO report. This goes to what's happening in Congress, with the, Schumer Rounds Act, all of that stuff. We had a narrative that seemed like it was moving forward very linearly, right? This was the one that Chris Mellon's group started, the TTSA. It was the Nimitz encounter, and, pilots were coming out. It was being investigated. Everything seemed like it was moving, not rapidly, but it was moving in the right way, for the right reasons, with hard science behind it. When David Grusch came out, it seems like it reconnected this to 75 years of UFO lore. And in some ways that might be good, but then it also complicates things so much, And again, I mentioned Lacatski and the Wilson Memo. It raises all of these questions about, wait a minute, do we have recovered, ET craft? And all of a sudden, Congress is running in circles trying to figure things out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just so complicated. But to your point, and this gets back to your original question, AARO should have done exactly what they did. There are different groups inside of the intelligence community with different agendas. For instance, the UAP task force, who was worked with Bigelow and the OSAP group, they have a different perspective, and Grush comes from that group also. And of course, Grush is representative, I think, of many of their views. And then you have the other side in intelligence, which is AARO, which is part of intelligence. And they obviously have a different perspective that's more aligned with NASA. So you have these different groups inside of the government, and Congress is the same. You have the congressional members like Marco Rubio and Kristen Gillibrand, who are part of the intelligence and armed services committees that typically have the type of clearances to get classified information. They have a perspective that's more aligned with AARO and NASA. They are empowering AARO and NASA to do their job. And to be honest, I think that route is the most legitimate and proper way to do it. Does it take time? Yeah. Does it mean they're going to be satisfied with AARO's work over time? We don't know that for sure, but like they are doing, you have to give AARO a chance to do some work. And we're jumping all over him and expecting them to be friendly and want to open their arms to us. And I don't think that, many people in the UFO community are giving them that fair shake. Then you have, another group that's in Congress that is more aligned with the Bigelow group. Although this is a group of House members, mostly Republicans, who are short timers. They haven't been there very long. They're not on these bigger committees, those more important committees. Many of them are part of a oversight committee that was thrown together in the last few years. It's not part of those intelligence and armed services, so they don't have the classified information. So they're saying, even our Congress members who have the classified information are part of the conspiracy, and they're not sharing information. Yet, this is the group that destroyed the Schumer Amendment. This is the group of House people that took apart the Schumer Amendment and essentially gave all the declassification power back to the originators, the people who haven't been declassifying enough. So it's really a confused mess, and it's really chaotic. And how do you make sense of it? And I think what people aren't looking at are traditional things. Politics. Republicans are going to go after the White House because there's a Democrat in the White House. Democrats would do the same if there's a Republican in the White House. So there's all these dynamics going on. Another dynamic that I think is being ignored is that this narrative about the Schumer Amendment being a response, or at least somehow confirming any of David Grush's claims. That's a total misnomer. We've even heard Gallagher, who's one of the more UAP-friendly Congress members, say, this is to do our due diligence. We are going to look everywhere that the conspiracists want us to look, expecting not to find anything. Maybe we will, but we don't expect to find anything, but at least we're going to do the full job to investigate this fully to show that, we're taking them seriously. That's what that was all about. Hopefully those Schumer kind of amendments will come back, because the declassification, that whole investigation is not happening, and it should, and it'll be great if it does. People have talked about that, so we'll see. But that AARO report was a response to Grush. It was, we have investigated this fully, and we don't find any veracity to the claims. Personally, I'm not surprised, because one, I don't find that they have any evidence to their claims either. They've got rumors that we've heard over the years. Some of the cases that they've pushed are those of us that have been in this field for a long time have been debunked. I don't think Grush is a liar at all. I don't think any of that group is liars. I think they're, like I said, they're great people. Some of them I consider friends, and I think what they've done is really important. But I just disagree that we have enough evidence to make the conclusions that they've made yet. But of course, I haven't seen all the evidence they allege to have. If they have more evidence, maybe they have the smoking gun I just haven't seen. And, you know, even George Knapp and I, when we've debated Bob Lazar, he's told me that. He's just like, I've seen stuff I can't show you. And I think you would think differently if you saw this. And maybe he's right, maybe he's not. But I haven't seen it, so I've only got to make the determination off the information I have and work towards then that information that does prove any of this to be true, get out into the public so we can all see it, we can all digest it, and then we can all learn that, okay, some of this stuff, some of this crazy exotic stuff you guys are claiming is true, really is real. But until then, it's just rumor and hearsay. And to your point, and this is something I'm examining on my show by interviewing a lot of media people, is that the media reacted. Just like you noticed that change, so did the media. We had a lot of press people that were getting really into UAP, especially in the defense and space kind of end of things. They were like, wow, this is getting legit. Legitimate people are looking into this. As soon as Grush came out, many of them felt that, oh, great, this is just all the rumor and hearsay crap that you guys have been doing for decades. I trusted you, and now you're pulling this on me, telling me all this crazy stuff and not giving me any evidence of it. And they turned. A lot of those journalists said, you know what, UFOs are as crazy as I thought. And they felt embarrassed, and they felt betrayed, and they left. And so one of the reasons I'm examining and interviewing a lot of these credible people, or these mainstream journalists, is to find out how much damage has been done. What can we do to fix this, and how do we get back on track? Which I think is doable.
Well, and no, again, I appreciate you saying all of that. I would say that I echo the same feeling, that it seemed like it was linear, it was building, it was not instantaneous progress, but barriers were coming down. You know, to steal a phrase, minds were opening, you know, and everything was moving in the right direction. And again, I'm not saying that anything that has come out of Grush, or like what Lacatski had said, or even, you know, the Wilson memo, I'm not saying any of that is incorrect. It just seems like it is confusing, and it has taken this story and just kind of made things go in circles, I guess. And
yeah,
it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Even if you believe that stuff, hold those cards close until you've got the evidence. And I personally advise some of that group that very thing. Don't say it until you can prove it. But
okay,
people went out there anyway.
Now, do you think that we'll be seeing another bombshell come out? I mean, again, in terms of evidence that could potentially be there, the reason I ask is the Grush testimony, there is apparently a lot of it, right? I mean, from what I understand, he's naming names, he's giving locations, he's doing all sorts of stuff. This is kind of hanging out there, to the best of my understanding. And presumably there's a lot more. I've heard rumors that there may be other whistleblowers that could be potentially coming forward. So there are a lot of things that are just kind of floating, waiting for resolution, that haven't been resolved. Do you think that we'll see more media explosions this year?
We'll see some media. We'll definitely see media explosions. There's always media explosions on this topic, even if that's just an exciting sighting that goes viral. You know, we've got a couple of those this year, which always makes people re-examine everything. So we'll see. We do have the part 2 of the historical report coming out in the next month or two. That's supposed to give us more details on who said what. It's not going to share names because they can't. That'll be redacted. But it'll probably have kind of their titles or ranks and then what they claimed. And one thing that we can't forget is, a lot of this is new to people. So the things that they're reacting to, when Marco Rubio says, wow, I saw some stuff in there that was incredible, that shows there's something to this, he may be reacting to Robert Salas and what Robert Salas told AARO, because we know he talked to AARO. Just like I had the reaction when I first read Robert Salas's story, I was like, wow, this is incredible. That's the type of thing they're reacting to. It doesn't mean they're reacting to aliens in a bunker somewhere. Robert, I forget his last name right now, but another, guy who was testing nuclear ICBMs and he, saw in a theodolite a film that, something came into the screen, shot it, and it tumbled out of the sky. Supposedly they weren't able to find that video in this AARO report, but if you heard his account, you would be shocked. So a lot of these people are reacting to, wow, there are better UFO cases out there than we thought. Not necessarily that, oh, there are dead bodies, because we really haven't heard from that side anybody say there's any confirmation of anything like that. So I think those are the things that we've got to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm absolutely going to title this UAP Science versus Speculation, because I think that you're really touching on a key issue, right? And this goes back to the core of what the SEU is founded on, but also, what you're doing over at Enigma Labs and what you've been trying to do with OpenMindsTV is focus people on the science and things that are tangible and can be proven. And I guess one of the areas that excites me about that is it has been in this, what you call he said, she said, I guess, right? For 75 years. And it's like, how do you actually move things forward? And like you're describing, it's the science, right?
Exactly. Because let's say that AARO did say, the DoD did say, we did recover a piece of technology and we don't know where it comes from and we think it's extraterrestrial. To be honest, I'm going to roll my eyes with them too. Just like I would with Bigelow. Show me the data and then I'll be impressed. That goes both ways for all parties. And I think the scientific community is going to be the same. I don't think the scientific community puts a whole lot more into the DoD claims than they would UFO, conspiracists. They want data. They want to be able to confirm what is being claimed. So no matter who's making the claim, the scientific community is going to say, prove it. And we're going to still be in the position of being able to do that. But even more exciting than that is if you step back for a second and look at this topic, especially as a scientific researcher, what are you going to do? You're going to want to gather data. Who cares what the government has or what they may or may not have? First of all, you're not going to get it. It's classified. Second of all, you can spend your entire life knocking on the White House door or the Pentagon door trying to get information, like some people have, and they've gotten nothing, very little. So I don't think that, or at least not what they think that is there. But one thing we can do is gather data. I think this assumption that if there's a third party out there that they are hiding information from us and always have been is wrong. I think my experience, my decades of experience in this field, military witnesses do not go to their superiors to report UFOs. And maybe you and other UFO researchers, I always ask them, how many of your military witnesses officially reported their UFO sighting? Most UFO researchers, even to my surprise, tell me none, because they don't report that. So somehow the military is going to be the first to find out. Not true. We're going to be the first to find out. We're the ones pulling the data. We're getting the data. We have the capability. Galileo's doing it. We're doing it at Enigma. Other people are doing it where we're looking at how do we gather data. First at Enigma, we're exploiting the phone as a sensor system to its nth degree. How can we grab all that data from the phone and add to our knowledge about the UAP? But further from that, we're going to need even more robust sensor systems. And these are sensor systems that not just, governments will have, but affordable enough where people like you and I can spend maybe a couple $100, mount this on our roof. And then it's not just going to get videos. It's going to get EMF readings, perhaps some sort of radiation type of readings, temperature readings, more light than just visible light, a lot more data. So if something is captured, we've got a lot of data about that. And then we can match that up against others. And that's repeatable science. And we have actual, repeatable empirical data where we can figure out the nature of some of these things. And like I keep saying, if you think it's aliens, then this is what you want to do, because you're going to be able to prove that it's aliens. You're going to be able to show that, this thing is emitting things that human technology does not emit. This thing's doing things that we can't do. And then you'll be able to have a better case. And that's where we need to go. So anybody looking for the truth, we really need to invest in gathering data.
Well, I want to take things full circle because I think you're touching on an important point that people look at the government as the gold standard when they really aren't, right? And so I think one of the biggest criticisms about the AARO Historical Report really came down to the fact that they did this unilateral approach to looking at these things, which they really had to, right, at the time. But, you are personally involved with data collection and analysis through Enigma Labs, as you just talked about, scientific research with the SCU, reporting through OpenMindsTV, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other projects out there in this space that are doing work, right? So one of the things that I've wondered about is, instead of trying to be everything for everyone, do you think the AARO should be working with your organizations or the dozens more like them that are doing rigorous, solid science and trying to lead a larger scientific coalition?
I think yes and no. And here's why I say that is that, to be honest, the UFO community has not been acting like a professional partner would. And that's been my big argument, is that, and I've used this exact verbiage, even, quite a bit for a while there in the SCU Slack when I was trying to make this argument, that our knee-jerk reaction is to be, you guys suck and you're doing this wrong. When it should be, thank goodness that you're finally looking into this topic. Thank you for saying that this is an important topic and needs scientific investigation. That's where our conversation needs to be coming from, and a place of cooperation. You don't, we need not just to allow them to do their thing, and stumble and fall and screw up. What we want them to do is to keep doing their thing till they start to get it right, at least to some degree. That's really helping. But instead, we're getting in the way. Imagine what that historical report would have been if Grush wouldn't have made those claims. It would have been what we wanted. It would have been focused on the Nimitz case or these other cases that are not explainable. Then they would have been forced to say, there are many cases throughout history where we just don't know what this was. And I think that's what a lot of the criticism is, they didn't make the argument in that paper that this is a, important topic, which is silly to me that people would make that criticism, because maybe you should have been appreciative in the other dozen press releases and reports that they did write up until this pace, where they did make that argument, because they've been making that argument, NASA and AARO, very strongly and forcefully, and Congress, that this is an important topic. We need to pay attention to it. It's a flight safety issue for commercial airlines and defense airlines. We need to, control the domain, especially incursions in secured airspace, and we're not able to do that. It's an important topic and we need to pay attention to it. That's been their message. And what do? We complain, aliens, aliens, aliens. And so when they're like, okay, we looked into aliens, we didn't find anything, we're like, why are you talking about aliens? What about the UFOs? You're not even talking about UFOs, you're talking about aliens.
Yeah.
You're the ones who wanted us to talk about aliens. And so it's just, that's what we're not taking in consideration. It's a very selfish, one-sided perspective. And it's not going to get anywhere. No sympathy for the NASA people who were harassed online for even dipping their toes in this topic. Do you think they're going to want to keep working in this topic, especially when there is no sympathy from people on this side who should be more professional? Instead, it's just like, adding to the fire. It's just, it doesn't make sense. If we really want this engagement, then we've got to open the arms and we've got to be cooperative. And if you believe it's aliens, that's what you'll want to do. To be honest, if I was Grush, he shouldn't have said anything. You keep those cards close. You work with your partners, which opens doors. You look and you see, you observe, you record. And then at one place, when you're really working together more strongly, that's when you can say, hey, you know what? I saw this document and this email, and I've got this information. This seems to be saying this. What's going on here? And then you're in a much stronger place of power to be able to do something and not just look like some goofball conspiracist. So I think we just need to be smarter and more savvy, and no matter what your perspective, but it's, in my opinion, and in my experience, and I've said this, and this has been kind of a hard realization in the last couple of weeks, and a mental exercise I've done. And I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but I've been thinking, you know what? Who would I rather work with, NASA or the UFO community? I've interviewed and worked with NASA quite a bit. Every single experience has been amazing. I'm a huge NASA fan. Every astronaut I've talked to, and everyone I do talk to, I ask about UFOs and write an article on it. Some couple have gone viral. They're just amazing, intelligent people who have dedicated their lives to ideas, to the idea of science and discovery. And that is what they put above everything. They're not going to lie, at least they're not going to lie and hold secrets, at least the people I've talked to,
Yeah.
which is, I think, a good cross section of astronauts. They're going to do what's right. And they're ornery. If they see something and they think it's in the UFO, they're going to come out and say it's a UFO. Like Buzz Aldrin has said in the past, although he's kind of waffled, well, maybe it wasn't a UFO, maybe it was, like most of us have with our UFO sightings. So they're just people, but they're good people, they're honorable people, and if you get in a room, they're going to listen to you and they're going to take you seriously. They always have with me, and I've been nervous, of course, every time when I say, hey, I'd like to ask your guy about UFOs. Every single time, the publicist on the NASA side is like, cool, that's great. They're excited about it. They're not like, oh, I don't know about that. No, they love it. Every time I'm surprised, I'm embarrassed to ask, but they're like, yeah, go for it. So, and luckily, it hasn't hurt my relationships with any of the publicists or any of these people, because you can if you're too aggressive. But yeah, I think that I look forward, and this is my goal, to work more closely with these official organizations and mainstream. I look very forward to it. And I believe that can only help to discover truths, even if there are these major secrets that many believe are
Yeah.
out there.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for saying that. Partnership and collaboration is so incredibly important. And that, to me, seems like it has been one of the big changes, from past UFO culture to the present, right? And so one of the things that I've seen is I have many, many friends who are in the military at all levels. And they seem to parallel the general public. The statistic that I've read is something like 38% of Americans believe in UFOs, right? And I'm seeing that in the military as well. Just because they don't speak up about it, just because they're not making a lot of noise, doesn't mean that they are not interested. It doesn't mean that they're not following it, right? So, one of the challenges has been that this community, it's very easy to accuse the government, accuse the military, accuse this person and that person because the answers aren't there. But, one of the things that I've wondered to myself is maybe they don't have the answers.
You know what? It's really funny you say that, because throughout this exercise, I have had the opportunity to work with more scientists on this topic. I've got to talk with, and interview Avi Loeb and other Galileo Project people, discuss people with AIAA, Enigma. We have been, we've presented to AARO and NASA, and been in a bit of that conversation. So I've been able to talk to a big cross section of people out there, and I kind of feel the same. I've always had this feeling, to be honest, that the government doesn't really know a whole lot more than we do. They may have better videos. They may have the smoking gun to show that there are, incursions into our military aerospace by technology that is more advanced than their own. And it's hands down video evidence or something like that. Who knows? But even if they do, I don't think they know what they're up to. When I look at the history of this topic, and anybody can do this, and you look at the top cases, what happened? And this includes Nimitz and Aguadilla. An object comes in, usually it's an incursion over secured airspace, whether that be Washington, D.C. in an airport, whether that be Malmstrom Air Force Base in a nuclear facility, whether that be Nimitz and San Diego training grounds. There's an incursion by an object. Jets are scrambled. The jets get there. Object's gone, disappears, or takes off at quick speed. Maybe in some occurrences, like Nimitz, and some other cases like Iran and a couple others, there's a little bit of a dogfight that goes on. The object definitely having a huge advantage and then taking off at quick speed. Over and over and over again, this is what we see. Coupled with military people being afraid, and commercial airline pilots even more being afraid to report UFO through official channels, I don't think it makes sense that the military has much. And, John Alexander, who worked in Army intelligence and put together famously this group of intelligence guys with high security to go find out where are the secret keepers, he found there weren't secret keepers. The problem was ignorance. Nobody wants to touch it. And so they're stupidly, and this is kind of Chris Mellon's point, when Chris Mellon, former Defense Deputy of Intelligence, been working with Elizondo and all, his perspective was, we have been so averse to touching this topic that we are closing our eyes to a lot of drone activity going on that is a real danger. And he was proven to be exactly right, because when we changed our radars so they would look at things that were more like what UAPR report at, slower, smaller objects, we saw these Chinese balloons with spy equipment on them. So sure enough, we were missing. And there's been multiple drone swarm incursions where, we don't even know what the hell's going on there. So it's worked. We now have more awareness in these domains of some technologies that we weren't looking into. Perhaps not, advanced enough to be beyond our own, but at least stuff that were dangers, national security issues that we were ignorant to.
Well,
so
I don't mean to interrupt, but so what you just touched on is, that's an amazing point, and that's something I've wondered about as well, right? Like, so the best way to spy on a military base or anything is to make your aircraft or drone look like UFO, because then that it won't be taken seriously, right? And so, our adversaries probably know this as well. So, if nothing else, I feel like the military should be analyzing and reviewing these things very, very carefully, because, that will make the UFO community happy. It makes everybody happy, and it will potentially detect somebody who might be playing games, right? Who maybe they're not little green or gray men. Maybe this is one of our adversaries impersonating them because they know that it won't get taken seriously.
Yeah. And the tough part is that if we're right, and the military really wasn't taking this that seriously, and they don't have much more information, but now they're gathering information and taking it more seriously, the potential that they do come across more data that does shed light on this happens, and we probably won't be shared that information. The big question has been like that you're definitely keeping secrets on this topic. So what are the secrets if you don't have anything that big? And they've told us a little bit, but it's something they don't want to touch on. Bray, during the first hearing, really, I think, put it pretty clearly. He was just like, we can't share anything with you. This is foreign intelligence. We can't, we would first have to say, this object is not foreign, an adversary's. How would you do that? how would you say anything that you collected where you didn't know what it was? How could you be certain to clear that it's not Chinese or Russian or an adversary's? That's a very difficult thing to do. So in that case, you cannot share any information or that even exists, because the foreign technology we receive, this is like the stuff of spycraft. This is like, the top secrets are, what do you know and what do we know? Bray even put it this way: we can't let the adversaries know how we're looking, what we're looking at, when we're looking at, if we're looking at, how, any of these aspects we can't share. And then he said, but we are committed to, transparency.
Yeah.
So it's just they're in a tough spot. That's why they can't. I don't see them being able to share a lot of information going forward.
No, and that makes sense. Now, Lester Nair from the UAP caucus had a really interesting description for a potential way around it. He'd said, can you characterize it without providing details? And he'd mentioned that during an interview I did. And I said, you know what? Wow, what a wonderful way to describe that. And so I would love to see some of these official organizations, in Congress, in the military, or whatever. I realize they can't give us details about it, but it would be wonderful for them to be able to characterize it, and we're not seeing a lot of that either. So
yeah, I mean, we're seeing a little. They did characterize their sightings. Another significant, finding they shared, which kind of went under the radar a bit, but that they were getting these metallic orbs quite a bit that they didn't know what they were. That was a genuine mystery. So that's a good one. So they've given us a little, but to your point, yeah, that's probably the most they'll be able to give us. And this will be, I think, the continuing struggle between Congress and AARO, which is give us more, give us more. What Congress is going to be saying, AARO is going to be saying we can't, we can't. And I think we've even seen this. Then behind closed doors, they come to a consensus. They come out from the closed doors, share a little bit of information, but always the public's disappointed because it's just not much that they share.
Well, Alejandro, on that note, let me thank you so much for your time today. It has been truly a pleasure being able to speak with you. It's an honor to have you present all of the different projects that you're working on, as well as help people understand, I think, a lot of the roadblocks that go into this kind of research. It is not as straightforward as people think. So let me close by asking, what's coming up for you in the next few months? And do you see any sea changes, I guess, happening in UAP, through the first part of this year?
Yeah, I think we'll get that report from AARO, and the second report, that'll just ruffle feathers even more. So I'm not sure that, but it'll be interesting, I think, and that's for sure, because we got to remember, even a case like Robert Salas, the military may take it very seriously that, there really was a UAP outside the gate when the missiles went offline, like Salas says. But what can you do with that? There's no data except for what someone says. And even if you take them seriously, you can't say, oh, aliens are here. You just got to say some anomaly happened. Hopefully we can gather more data next time it happens and understand it better. So just because they're saying aliens aren't here, doesn't mean they're not saying Robert Salas isn't a legit, witness. And I think that's some of what will be the nature of a lot of the arguments and confusion going forward. I hope to, like always, and like with SCU, I'm always trying to figure out how do we move this conversation and the research forward. So I am doing my podcast, Open Minds UAP News. Do tune in. I'm going to be interviewing more kind of mainstream people, more of the newer people coming in, and not really traditional kind of researchers and stuff like that. Just so we can try to integrate with the mainstream some more and get to know them and get to know their perspectives and get to figure out how to work together. That's what we were doing at SCU, and we're making a lot of grounds, and that can continue. I also want to start up another project here soon that is kind of more citizen science to help gather groups of people that can come up with ideas and start to get out there and gather data so we can get that to scientists, because that's what we've got to do right now, gather data. So I really want to hook up with people, including and especially educators and schools. I want to try to help build STEM projects where, there are clubs where there are kids, UFO hunting, building sensor packages and software to be able to gather data. So I really want to make this a thing that we can all do together, that, whether you're a skeptic or you're really into it or you're NASA or whatever, that it's something people can get from it and work together on. Even if we're debating, hopefully we can even create a culture where we can debate this information and our different perspectives in a civil manner, where we can, it's, I'm sure everybody has this with your family. We all debate stuff with our family, and if you've got a loving, there's those moments where it's fun, and that's how it is with a lot of my friends. We don't see things the same way. Do you think I'm good friends with David Hatcher Childress or some of the other guys on Ancient Aliens? I definitely have a different perspective than some of those guys, but it's fun to talk about and debate all this stuff on different points of view. So I just hope that we all learn to do that as a community a little more better, and cooperate with each other, because there's really this your side versus my side, and if you don't believe what I don't believe, then you're useless, and I don't want you to be part of what I do, and that's not helpful, and that's not going to get anybody anywhere. We're all on the same team.
On that note, let me thank you again so much for your time today, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.